from a liquid to a gas phase, right? So that's just, so which force is that? Inter. And then our intra is when we're breaking it up from that gas phase, and we're breaking it up into our hydrogen and our oxygen on there. Okay. And this will just kind of go back to the other activities that they did on the Friday after their exam when they did the tape. They put tape on their desk and they pulled it up, and one of them has a negative charge and one of them has a positive charge, and they were kind of showing how they either repel when they held it up to somebody else's that had the same one, or they could either kind of go together at being attractive forces on that. Okay, so it's just a nice little photo, kind of generally how we kind of think about our intermolecular forces with our gases, liquids, and then solids on there. Okay, so we'll kind of take a look about a little bit, kind of going back to Coulombs Law, dealing with this whole entire concept of energy and the charges and then the radius between the molecules. Okay. Okay, so then we're kind of getting onto this whole entire idea of this electrostatic force, right? And so the whole entire concept that if we have opposite charges, they're going to attract one another. If we have similar charges, they're going to be opposing each other, right?
Yes.
Yes. That's what I want to hear. Okay, in covalent molecules, it's going to be kind of determined on their polarity involved with the reaction. Okay. So with this one, we're talking about having kind of this net dipole moment, and then we're going to be referring it, instead of just saying a net dipole, we're just going to be kind of calling it our dipole moment, right? So they went over a little bit with that of drawing their nets. I think they didn't do it as heavily as they just kind of drew it within the bonds. So some of them might be a little confused on that, so they might need some help on that. Okay, so then we're kind of starting to get into this whole entire idea of dipole-dipole moments. And we have this whole entire idea that obviously the positives and the negatives are going to attract. Why are the positives and the negatives going to attract? Electrostatic, right? So it's going to want to kind of bring those ends together versus bringing the two positive ends together on there. Okay, so it even shows on here, it shows what would be attracting and then what would be repulsing. So these two are going to be repulsing, obviously, but these two are going to be attracting on there. Okay, so it's also going to depend on the distance and the dipole moment, which is something that we'll have to kind of go over with them a little bit. And then these are just some more diagrams about how they kind of set up. Sometimes they're set up very nice, kind of more in a lattice. Sometimes they're kind of scattered and all over the place on there. Okay. So what do we think about this question? False. Why do we think false?
Because there are plenty of examples of nonpolar compounds.
That'll be the key one on there. So if somebody were to ask you, if one of the students were to ask you, how do I know whether gases are nonpolar or polar, what explanation would you give them?
How do you know if a gas is polar or nonpolar?
Well, no, how do you know that not all nonpolar compounds are gases?
I would tell them to think about diamond. Diamond's just all carbon, so it's definitely nonpolar, and it's the hardest solid that we know.
So always try to give them that example, so then they're like, oh, okay, I think about it now. Okay, lovely job. Okay, so this is just kind of going back to this whole entire, on that Friday after the exam, they pour water and ethanol to the charged rod and just kind of see whether it attracted or repulsed it, right? So now they're just kind of trying to go over this whole entire idea of that. And then they're going to talk about the possibility of hexanes and carbon tetrachloride, how they're existing as liquids. And then let's go over real quickly that how is it possible for octane to have a higher boiling point than water?
Larger.
It's a larger molecule. And we'll get more into this on Friday's lecture on the worksheet. But that's one thing that you always have to think about is you have to think about the size of the chain, right? Water's going to be a much smaller molecule versus this whole entire kind of spread out octane chain that we're dealing with on there.
Hydrogen bonding as well.
Hydrogen bonding as well. That's going to play a big role in it because you're going to have a lot more hydrogens on your octane, obviously, than you are just a little water molecule, right? Okay. Okay. pretty sure we're not gonna get past this point in class just because there's a lot of slides on there. And then we'll start getting more into this whole entire idea of the induced dipole moment, which I'm pretty sure we'll be going over those on Friday. Okay, so did everybody go over their worksheet that we're gonna be doing on the activity we're doing Friday in class? Okay, so let's go over that guy real quick.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay,
That works.
there you go. Okay, so does everybody feel confident on drawing the Lewis structures for these? Is there any particular one that nobody feels confident on in any of these guys? No? Okay, we're feeling good on? Okay, so we'll just briefly look at them just to make sure we're all on the same page. So we know that obviously our hexanes and octanes are gonna be a lot larger of chains on there. Our ethanol is only gonna have the one hydroxide group. When they're drawing this, the ethanol, ethene diol, they're probably gonna have a little bit harder of a time possibly realizing that this oxygen here is gonna be connected to this carbon and then this oxygen will be connected to that carbon. So they may need some help on that. Carbon tetrachloride, I know we've done that one before in class, so they should be pretty confident. The hexane and the nonane, hexane and the octane, I'm sorry, they may have not gone over their prefixes just yet, so they may not realize hexane's gonna be 6 and octane's gonna be 8. They should be okay with it, but
I mean, it gives you
It
the
gives you the
formula.
formula.
never mind. Ignore what I say. Okay, so I don't have a blank copy of this, and I don't put the answers up there. Okay, so we're looking at the table on our previous page, right? And if you don't have it, we can just go ahead and share it with somebody. What's the correlation between the molecular weight and the boiling point, generally speaking?
As it goes up, boiling point goes down.
So we notice that trend that we kind of see as we're going throughout the table on there, right? Okay, so number 2. So what do we know about correlating the structures of the molecules and the boiling points? Do we notice anything that's different on some of the molecules that some of them have that some of the other ones don't?
Some of them are polar.
Polar groups, yeah.
Some of them are polar, but why also are they polar too?
Electronegative atoms.
They have those hydroxide groups on there, right? And so what do we notice that if we have more hydroxide groups on there, does that change the boiling point?
Yes.
Yes. Why?
Hydrogen or intermolecular.
All of it relates to that whole entire idea of the hydrogen bonding on there, right? So we talked about molecular weight. So obviously we know the molecular weight is also going to tend to tie into kind of size a lot of times, right? We notice that octane chain is going to have a higher boiling point than the hexane versus the methane and whatnot on there. Okay? Let's see. Okay, so looking at number 5, we're talking about the y-axis and the x-axis. So what is the y-axis telling us? The boiling point. And then what about our x-axis? From what? Periodic table. Okay, so when we move within a period on our graph, what is it telling us about the boiling point?
Increases.
Yes, Michael?
It goes up.
You don't have to use Michael's little hand when you're explaining that to students. Okay,
I always talk with my hands though.
I can see that. Okay, so what do we notice when we move within a group?
Boiling point goes down.
As you go down, it decreases.
Say that again?
As you go down.
There's a general increase beyond that initial jump.
It's a net general increase, right? And we kind of noticed that period 2, and this is kind of going over question number 2. Period 2 doesn't really tend to follow that trend as much as everything else does, right? We kind of noticed that we tend to see that trend a lot more with the period 3 and 4 and 5. Why do we think that we don't see that with period 2 as much?
Because carbon, hydrogen is a non-polar bond.
It only has one valence shell.
It only has the one valence shell. So we're looking into this whole entire concept, not the carbons as heavily as we are like your nitrogens, oxygens, and fluorines too, right? Those are also extremely electronegative, so that's gonna kind of play a little bit role within that as well. Okay? How are we feeling about the worksheet? Feel confident?
Yeah.
You can explain it? Awesome. So we will be doing that in Friday in class. We'll obviously have more slides to go along with that. And then we're doing a small PLA activity today. Very busy.
It like, it messes my.
I feel like you're going across.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm going across, but I'm like.
Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna be talking about leadership styles today. So if you guys have a piece of paper, go ahead and pull it out. You can even split a piece of paper with somebody in half, it doesn't matter. This is only for your records. So this is not gonna be viewed by anybody. And take a couple of minutes here and think about your leadership skills, kind of what do you do when interacting with the students, when leading groups and whatnot. So just take a few minutes and kind of jot some ideas down regarding that.
Yeah, wait, can you? Yeah.
Okay. So take a few minutes and write down kind of like what leadership skills you believe that you have in yourself.
In the context of the classroom.
In the context of the classroom, or just in general too. It doesn't have to be just within the PLA program, but just kind of what you kind of see in yourself on that. And then we're going to kind of go over that. Okay, does everybody have a couple things jotted down? No, you don't need a whole paragraph by yourself, Michael.
I was trying.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over a little sheet that Jenny Smith has made up, and it's 10 very kind of general leadership styles and whatnot. And the idea behind this is go ahead, based on the skills that you wrote down, go ahead and see if you can find 2 of them that kind of apply to you. And then also maybe you see these 2 apply to you, but maybe you see another one you kind of want to have that one maybe for the future and whatnot. Okay? And so the different type of styles we have on here So we have the autocratic or the authoritarian. Typically do kind of an absolute power over his or her employees, telling them what to do. Typically team members have little or no say in the process. Then we have bureaucratic, where you're working pretty much by the book, making sure that nobody's kind of delineating from the kind of set goals and whatnot. You also have charismatic, lots of enthusiasm and energy, not necessarily as big on the team as they can be believing in themselves more. If the leader of the organization were to leave, sometimes it can be kind of seen that the organization will kind of start kind of taking the nosedive if that charismatic person isn't there anymore. Okay, then we have democratic or participative. Democratic ones, they make the final decisions, but they kind of let the people kind of help with the decision process as to kind of what direction they're going to head with everything. They allow members to kind of feel as though they're in control of their own destiny, but not necessarily letting them actually be in control of their own destiny. There's also the laissez-faire, which in French is let it be. So it's this whole entire concept of kind of letting people do their own thing, very minimal assistance and support. This can sometimes kind of tend to be how a lot of companies will work, depending on what they're doing. In my previous work experiences, that's how we work, because we all kind of knew what we were doing, so you were just kind of left on your own to do a lot of things. It requires a lot less management time to be focused on you, and it's really good for places that are really busy and don't have time to focus on every single minor detail. Then we have task-oriented, very structured, uses lists, make sure everything gets done. The bad thing about this one sometimes is that the group welfare is not the main focus. So the main focus in that one is to get the project done, which is great and all, but then sometimes it's not taking into consideration personal needs on there. People are relationship-oriented, people that are focused on helping, kind of almost the opposite of the task-oriented one, right? More kind of worried about the interaction with people and stuff. Sometimes the bad thing is it doesn't necessarily always lead to getting the task done, though, if you're too concerned with that. So you gotta kind of find that balance sometimes between the task-oriented and the people-oriented. So the other couple ones we have, servant, which typically these people are not gonna really be even recognized as leaders, because a lot of people aren't even gonna know that they even are the leaders of a certain organization or whatnot. Let's see, transformational, very optimistic, good team motivators. They don't necessarily have to lead from the front, they can delegate, but also their enthusiasm can be infectious. And then situational leaders switch between different leadership styles depending on people, and kind of also just depending on the situation on there. So does anybody want to mention what they think they are out of these 10 ones? Michael?
Oh, y'all probably can just guess it. Charismatic and people relationship one.
Does everybody agree on that one?
Probably.
Yeah.
Cool, thanks, guys. I'm glad no one said autocrat. Like that's
I'm pretty sure nobody would say you're on.
That's
That's hard.
Well,
hard
very
to-
situational.
You what?
Well, just very situational instead of autocratic.
So what about anybody else want to?
I'll go. I would probably say I'm situational, just because when certain situations come up, you have to handle them very differently. And like for something like this program versus if I play rugby, you have to kind of lead in different ways, because one's more for teaching, the other one's like you have to inspire them to like go get it kind of thing, where everyone's kind of on the same level. So
You have to be more charismatic than the
Yeah.
other one. Anybody else? Armin?
I don't know. When you can hug.
What do I think you are?
Yeah.
Ooh,
You didn't say that.
let's see. I don't know what skills you wrote down though. I'm gonna go with not authoritarian on that one.
He seems laissez-faire.
Yeah,
I was gonna say laissez-faire.
that's a pretty fair estimate.
That's a pretty fair one. I would either go with, I was gonna say servant or people in relationship. Well, ESP Armin just kind of does what I tell him to do, so based on my relationship with him. Anybody else? Kittyza?
I would say people oriented.
I would agree.
I would say, I guess mine is like my three, kind of the authoritarian, the people oriented, and then the situational. Because there are times that you have to be authoritarian for things to get done. Because I've noticed that in one of my other labs when I've had two other partners. And you have to like either tell them what to do or else it's not gonna happen, or you have to do it. But at the same time, like you have to take into account like who you're dealing with. So there's your people oriented aspect, and then situational, and that's completely different than in the classroom. Whereas here it's more people oriented.
Right.
And you have to deal with a wide range of students.
Yeah, I know me personally, like I'm very situational because obviously when we're in this classroom, I tend to be very authoritarian because I have to be, right? But then once we actually get into the classroom setting, then I tend to kind of vary in the back. You know, I tend to more watch you guys, but I'm not as active as a role. And then sometimes when Sophie and I are discussing things, I'm the very laissez-faire one. I'm just like, Sophie, it'll be fine. It'll get done. She's the one that's kind of, she's freaking out about it, you know. So I know for me personally, I'm definitely situational because it just kind of depends on where I'm at, you know, as to whether I have to put on that more kind of authoritative role or do I kind of do this whole entire laissez-faire premises behind it. Is there any one of these that anybody would like to kind of try to start emulating? Ale?
Why me?
You're right there.
Should I leave my people or relationship oriented? Maybe I'd like to try authoritarian once.
Just to lay down the law.
Just once.
Yeah, just once, you know,
See
like
how
just show up
people
one day
react
and be
to it.
completely different, and people look like,
Completely
who are you?
Who are you?
The other side of AL.
The other side.
This is gonna be a bad documentary. Dictator leadership. Start taking over the world.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Anybody else? Nicole? Calling on you guys, you guys freak out every time.
Should probably be more people or relationship oriented.
Definitely, that could definitely be a good thing, because it definitely, especially when you're working on projects, that could definitely help a lot. Because obviously you take a very authoritative role, which sometimes you need to if you have people that are not working well together, but sometimes you don't want to necessarily take that role like right out of the gate working on a project, because then they're like, oh, look at that person, they're just trying to control everything. Anybody else? Manny?
I'm definitely authoritarian. Definitely.
I think we all know that.
And if I'm not authoritarian, then I'm laissez-faire, which is pretty much if I'm not in control, then you should do it on your own.
What would you possibly like to emulate in the future?
Just more authoritarian.
She's gonna take over the world of ale.
Yep. Me and the other side of AL. Not
Remember that.
I have to wait until he grows an evil goatee. You got it. No, I should probably be a little more people/relationship oriented.
Okay. I don't think we have to worry about charismatic for most of you guys. So, don't forget about these guys on the other side.
No.
I think most of us are somewhat transformational.
We have to be transformational in class.
You have to be, yeah.
Because
Yeah,
You are.
they're like, why are we doing this paper? It's like, come on, you're in this class, you paid for it, we want to help you learn.
Definitely have to be transformational in class, because you also have to be very optimistic with them, because a lot of them, especially if they aren't doing well in the class, then they're already kind of down on everything. You know, a lot of them in that classroom are first-year college students, you know, so especially if they haven't done well on their first couple exams, they're freaking out, they're thinking their whole entire college career is going down the drain, you know. And so they need that optimism from you guys, like, hey, we know this is hard, we've been through it, plenty of people have been through it, you'll survive, you'll get through it type thing. So. Okay, so another PLA training, done. Check. Okay, awesome, well, I will see you guys in class.
Please, do you